from V.V. Raju Institute of Technology, Narsapur, and this is the 5-day seminar on national webinar series on sustainable materials and construction technologies. We have already completed the first 2 talks, and today is the 3rd day. And I'm sure that this topic, sustainable materials and construction technologies, would be, is very significant. And we need to look at this subject in more detail. Although we had webinars earlier on this, in fact, Dr. Ajit Sabnis himself had come during the 18th webinar, that was somewhere during May 8th or May 9th, when he spoke about sustainable construction. So today is the 72nd webinar, and again you are there. So I'm sure that you would be able to add more details on this, and many of the professionals would be able to have number of takeaways from today's talk. Just a brief about our organization. We are also into the area of wind energy, and we generate almost 2,400 lakh units per annum. So something related to what you call the renewable energy, and we also incorporate the latest technology and pioneers in blended cement, which is again one of the aspects of sustainability which is required, and it has always been of great importance to Ramco Cement's sustainability, and we have been winning several awards for energy efficiency, and as well as in mining, manufacturing aspects, and of course CSR activities, number of CSR award. Of course, limestone is one thing which is getting depleted day by day, so we need to manufacture cement which is of good quality, as well as at the same time ensure that the natural resources are available for the future generations as well, because that is what sustainability is all about. So we have taken number of initiatives in that regard, and we have also have number of testing equipments, ranging from X-ray fluorescence analyzer, because what is important is to determine the quality of incoming raw materials in the manufacturing of cement, and at the same time mining also we need to ensure that it is environmental friendly, and we have a powerful ERP to integrate all this for timely review and intervention. These are some of the things. When we talk about sustainability, we are talking about conservation of energy. We are talking about technology absorption, because without absorption of technology, how do we actually, make sure that the process is efficient and energy efficient? So in every thing, whether it is every stage of manufacturing, we have this thing. And most importantly, we need to understand the characteristics of material. As one speaker was telling, there is nothing called waste. Waste is something that we do not understand the characteristics of the material. So as long as we have the testing equipment to understand the properties of all materials, I think the recycling and the optimum usage of all materials would be very effective. We have, of course, the 12 brands of cements which has been customized to various applications, ranging from RMC units to precast units to ordinary residential buildings. Dry mix products which we have from our dry mix plant. We have the Ramco Research and Development Center to ensure that there is a good collaboration between the site aspects as well as the laboratory thing, so that we understand the properties of material. So that's the idea of having a separate R&D center. We have this 4 Leaves Award to ensure which has been given to us for having adopted technology, energy efficiency measures, point source and fugitive dust control. Of course, the interaction with various customers has helped us in various ways to ensure that we customize the cement. So this is the 5-day seminar that we are having. So as I was telling, the first 2 days is over. Today is the 3rd day. Tomorrow we have 2 lectures starting from 11 o'clock till 1 o'clock, which would be going on one after the other. And on day 5th, on 10th July, we have on energy efficient building materials. That would be the last this thing on this theme, but we continue to have the webinars even thereafter. So let me just invite Dr. Sridevi to give an introduction of the speaker. Over to you, Dr. Sridevi.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, please, over to you for introducing. Yeah.
So I welcome you all on the 3rd day of this FTP, Sustainable Construction and Sustainable Materials and Construction Technologies. So we have done 2 days. This is the 3rd day. I welcome you all for this faculty development program. As rightly said, when we teach, we learn. When we learn, we teach. So for that reason, we are including all faculty members as well as students also for this program, webinar series I can call. So we all know that civil engineers play a vital role in improving the quality of quality of life of citizens. In the process of creating the infrastructure facilities, we consume lot of resources, use materials which are of high embodied energy, use great amount of energy right from operation to maintenance. So these activities which are related to infrastructure development are also responsible for some of the pressing issues like emission of greenhouse gases and depletion of natural resources. As a civil engineer, if we do not address these problems now, maybe in the future we have to witness a planet without any natural resources. So today we have with us Dr. Ajit Sabnis, who has contributed a lot for the sustainable construction and sustainable technologies. Sir, we are very much privileged to have you here, sir. For
Thank
the
you.
benefit of audience, I'm presenting a brief biodata, very brief because of paucity of time. Sir, I'm privileged to introduce you. Thank you. Dr. Ajit Sabnis is a graduate from BMS College of Engineering, postgraduate from IIT Madras, and doctorate from Jain University. He has a lot of experience and a total of 40 years in the field of civil engineering. He has to his credit more than 350 completed projects in India and abroad. During the tsunami days, he offered his services as consultant to Red Cross at Maldives. A member of TC40, a committee under Asian Council of Civil Engineers, he is also the project director for 3 sustainable projects under UNEP in India. He is currently the principal consultant at the ASP STI Sustainability Assessment Consultancy firm. His specialization provides sustainability assessment of buildings and infrastructure projects prior to actual construction phase, enabling concerned stakeholders to evolve and adopt right kind of methodology, technology, and global warming mitigation strategy, moving towards sustainable development. His passion to disseminate the right kind of field knowledge among the civil engineering fraternity made him to initiate publishing a reference magazine called Built Expressions, which won the Best Indian Construction Industry magazine title in 2012. He has published several articles and papers in various magazines and international journals. He has guided 20 students in their graduate and postgraduate programs, and he has, to his credit, many accolades. He was the past president of ACC during 2015 to 2017. He is a member of several technical organizations too. Apart from engineering, school education is his next domain in which his contribution is immense. Being a chairman of CBSE school in Bangalore, he has authored 16 activity-based child-centric lesson plan books that can be directly implemented in primary and secondary school levels. He has, to his credit, several teacher training programs at government and non-governmental levels. Sir, I welcome you, sir, for this FTP to present your
Thank you.
lecture. And definitely, I'm sure there will be many takeaways for us, right?
Hopefully, let us see. Let us.
No, sir.
Yeah.
Over to you, sir. Thank you.
So can I start or?
Yes, sir. Please, sir. Over to you, sir. It's over to you. Now it's all yours.
All right. Thank you. So you have given me 45 minutes instead of 60 minutes.
No, you can take 60 minutes. Absolutely no problem, sir.
All right. Let us see. Good morning to one and all. And a special, cheers to all the students who are participating in this third day seminar of this series. And the whole presentation is going to be actually focused on students based. So I'm sure there are some senior people who are there, and then it may seem to be very preliminary, but the focus is entirely for the students. So once again, thanking Ramco and Anil Pillai for initiating these kinds of things. I also thank Dr. Sridevi for giving me this opportunity to share some of my views. Anil, what I will do is I will mute my video and then share the session, my PPT. Am I audible to all? Anil?
Audible, sir. You're audible. You're audible, and we are able to see your screen also.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, it's visible. You can put it on the
first slide
slideshow. It is on the slideshow only, I believe, right?
Yeah,
Yes, sir,
it is on the slideshow. Are you able to see the first
Yeah,
slide?
we are able to see. Yeah, yes.
All right.
please go ahead.
We are able to see.
So let us go here. Friends, one of the most defining challenges of 21st century is to respond to a problem of climate change. More so with civil engineers, as they play a very critical role, as Sridevi ma'am told in the beginning. And we are all responsible for the built environment that happens and that is happening. And we are also able to, as civil engineers, we are all not only responsible for built environment, but we are also provide lot many solutions peeping into the future. It's not that climate never changed in the past. Before human activities are infused more heat into the atmosphere. It was there earlier, but due to several reasons about which we do not have sufficient data, we do not have any evidences whether this kind of or quantification is possible for the warming that happened earlier. But the rapidity with which the climate is changing now and which we are observing as of now has never happened in the last 3 lakh years. What we have seen in the recent times is unprecedented. Just to tell you the unprecedented events, some of the listings. Are you able to see my second slide?
Yes, we are able to see, sir.
All right. See, some of the unprecedented events of our times. Actually, the warming of the earth is extremely visible, and the consequent changes which is happening, increased carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere, the rapidity with which the greenhouse gases emissions is increasing, the ocean acidification is taking place. Please remember the rapidity with which ocean acidification is happening. This has never happened about 3 million 100 years, last 300 million years. Ocean is getting warmed even at 700 meters deep, rapidly changing rainfall patterns, accumulating waste, not only on the land, but also in the oceans and in the Himalayas and everywhere. Urbanization, rural migration, melting of glaciers, floods, and other anthropogenic calamities, polar amplification, permafrost, etc. These are the few unprecedented events which we are seeing right now. Now, this also, let us looking at the global footprint of the buildings and the collective impact of all building materials and services. The World Green Building Council has come out with an ecological footprint, which is on your screen. Now, global footprints of buildings itself, if you take, it is responsible for 17% of freshwater consumption, 25% of wood that we harvested, then about 33 to 35% of carbon dioxide emissions. Here, when we say carbon dioxide emissions, it's actually, it includes several other gases. But anyway, so because the predominantly CO2 is very predominant among the greenhouse gases, we call it as CO2 emissions, which also includes some of the other gases. Now, it also is responsible for about 30 to 40% of energy consumption, and also responsible for about 40 to 50% of raw material consumption. Now, if we start looking at these things and then actually come to the carbon footprint of India itself, how the construction industry is happening, how the entire building industry is responsible, what we can see actually is India is slowly has come to be on the third position now in emitting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. The first two are being China and the US. Actually, China, US, and other European countries put together, they constitute almost about 65% of the total carbon dioxide emission into the atmosphere. Though India is in the third position, even today, we are responsible for about 7% of the total carbon dioxide emission. In this total emission, construction industry contributes, as we saw in the previous slide, about 40% to the global warming or to the greenhouse gas emissions. And operative maintenance, etc. phase will consume about 75 to 80% of the energy, and pre-construction phases will have about 20 to 25%. In this, what happens is the fourth stage, what we are actually seeing here, the pre-construction stage and construction phase is the most neglected phase. Now, why I say it is neglected phase? Because the green rating systems, etc., we give importance to the green building concept, achievement of sustainability, etc., subsequent to the construction part of it. So this neglected phase of the construction has to be actually given a lot of importance, and we need to see what kind of strategies we approach. Now, before we actually get into the what sustainable construction is, we need to understand there are certain important terminologies which let us understand. One is, what exactly is sustainable development? Now, sustainable development is that which meets the need of the current generations without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. Which means to say that we not only, nobody says this is the World Commission definition for sustainable development. Now, what it means actually is you don't have to, completely dedicate or surrender your needs, etc. But what is important is, without, you need to, take care of keep the future generations also in the mind. But how do we actually, once we want to make the resources available for the future generation, what is actually important is the reduce, recycle, reuse concept, and then the true sustainability concept has to be actually understood. Now, what exactly is sustainable construction? Then once we understand sustainable development, what exactly is sustainable construction? Now, sustainable construction has not been very satisfactorily defined yet. We are not able to do it very satisfactorily, but there are several definitions. Just to cite a few, the ways in it, which is on the screen itself, so I'll just read it out. The ways in which structures are built, procured, erected, used and operated, maintained and repaired, modernized, rehabilitated, dismantled and reused, or demolished and recycled, constitute the complete cycle of sustainable construction. Now, the second definition goes on to say that holistic process aiming to restore and maintain harmony between the natural and built environments and create settlements that affirm human dignity and encourage economic activity. So we also have quite a few other definitions. One of the most important definition, which I feel now is applicable, is actually the underlined one, the last one which you see, we are just seeing on your screen. That is, sustainable construction is a process of creating and operating a healthy environment based on resource efficiency, and ecological design. So this is the one particular definition which I felt that it is more appropriate and it's more acceptable to many of the international communities. Now, once we see what exactly is the sustainable development and what exactly is sustainable construction, we should now let us try to understand what exactly is the greenhouse gas effects. Now, I hope my talk and the screen is my screen is available to you, right?
Yes, yes. If there is any problem, we will let you know, sir. It's very much clear.
Now, let us quickly understand what exactly is the greenhouse gas effect. Now, greenhouse gas is a gaseous compound actually in the atmosphere that is capable of absorbing infrared radiation, thereby trapping and holding heat in the atmosphere. Accumulation of GHG also leads to greenhouse gas effect, and this subsequently leads to global warming. These greenhouse gases form blanket in the atmosphere, in our biosphere, and which hold the temperature below the blanket and which will increase the temperature. On the screen, you see carbon dioxide, then the methane is there, nitrous oxide is there, perfluorocarbons, etc., which are the greenhouse gases. But majority of it is carbon dioxide, and that is why when we say carbon footprint or carbon emissions, etc., we actually refer to all the other greenhouse gases. And also the other important reason is all these greenhouse gases are actually converted equivalent to other greenhouse gases. In one of the few slides, in the next few slides, we will see what exactly is global warming potential. So which means to say, and carbon dioxide remains in the atmosphere for a very long time. It almost remains there almost about 60 to 70 years. So that is why so much all the other methane gases, though all the other gases are more, will have more adverse impact than carbon dioxide, but they stay in the atmosphere very short time. So mitigating carbon dioxide and carbon footprint becomes extremely important. Even assuming that if we stop everything at this point in time, already an effect of about 30 to 40 years. So whenever we design a building, let us say with a design life of about 50 to 60 years or 60 to 70 years, if we do not take the greenhouse gas effect or make the building sustainable, we are actually not doing justice to our design. So our designs are not sustainable at all in the first place because there is already an accumulated effect which is already there in the atmosphere. This, which leads to greenhouse gas, which leads to global warming, there is an increase of the Earth's average temperature. This is the Earth's average surface temperature due to the effect of greenhouse gases. And in the next slide, what you're actually seeing is the measurement of carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere. This is called the Keeling curve, and this Keeling curve is actually mounted. The measuring instrument is mounted on one of the Mount Hawaii in the US, and then it is being measured since 1958. When in 1958, carbon dioxide concentration was 320 ppm. Now in 2015, from 1958 till 2015, we were in the range of 300 and less than 4. In 1915, we crossed the 400 ppm mark, and in 2020, as on yesterday, actually, the data is 417.16. Every day, the carbon dioxide concentration is measured, and then there is a table which is maintained by by the agencies and the coordinating agencies. And then this is what you see, the figure of 417.16 ppm is yesterday's record. So by the time 2100, it is going to be 800 ppm, which actually is probably, they're saying approximately immediately after we cross 500 mark, there will be huge health hazards and then lot of adverse impact, much deterioration that is going to happen. And so that is why all the 195 countries, all these green summits that take place internationally under the umbrella of United Nations, the 2030 agenda, as what they call 2030 agenda, according to the agenda, we have to restrict the increase in temperature to less than 2 degrees. The 500 ppm, once it crosses, the 800 ppm, when it crosses, it is approximately about 4 degrees in temperature in the average increase of the surface Earth temperature. Now, let us understand what the global warming potential means. Okay. Now, as I said earlier, the carbon dioxide is taken as the base greenhouse gas, and if its global warming potential, GWP, is 1, all other greenhouse gases are actually quantified in terms of carbon dioxide as its base. For example, methane is 25 times deadlier than carbon dioxide, and perfluorocarbon is about 7,400 to 12,000 times deadlier than carbon dioxide. But as I said, all the other gases remain very short time as compared to the carbon dioxide's existence in the atmosphere. So that is why the most important greenhouse gas that is concerns us is the carbon dioxide. So as we see in the next slide, when we talk about global warming, etc., and I also talked about the 2030 agenda. Now, all the 195 countries across the nation, they are meeting almost every 2 years, once in every 2 years, and then drawing up lot of details. Every country has, there are what are called national voluntarily disclosures about the green, how they're taking up the sustainability development goals, etc., etc. Now, in this, so all 195 countries, actually, what you're seeing in the green line is if all countries on the planet Earth restricts its temperature, follow sustainability rules, etc., etc., put our efforts together so that the global warming or the increase in temperature does not exceed 1.5 to 2 degrees, then the green curve will happen, and then 2100, we still have a hope to survive. But if you see what is happening, if we do not take any care, probably it will, by 2100 degree, by 2100, the temperature increase will be about 4 to 4.5 degrees. What it means, about 4 to 5 degrees increase in the average Earth's temperature, in the global temperature, will actually lead to about 50% decline in crop yield, which is projected. It increases the melting of several glaciers, loss of moisture from soil, the change, rain patterns will completely get distorted. There will be huge amount of droughts, heat waves, floods, cyclones, and several other disasters, which actually take us into a very complicated issue. And there will be a lot of cities like New York, Tokyo, Shanghai, Hong Kong, and will also get submerged in the because of the global warming and then the melting of the glaciers. There will be increase in the ocean level, and India also, with probably the longest coastline in the world, several cities will get submerged or at least get inundated to a greater extent. Now, the next important term, what we have to understand is actually what exactly is the embodied energy. Now, all these things are required students and what exactly is sustainable construction and how do we understand sustainable materials, and that is why these slides are necessary and then these terminologies are necessary. What exactly is embodied energy? Now, embodied energy is the total non-renewable energy that goes into the manufacture of a material and plays a large role in the choice of building materials. It is an important factor to consider when assessing the life cycle of a building, and it relates directly to the sustainability of built environment. Now, this total embodied energy can be actually divided into two further energies, initial embodied energy and then the recurring embodied energy. Initial embodied energy is further classified into direct embodied energy, which means to say that the energy that is used to transport building materials and then to construct the building. So actually the pre-construction phase and then the construction phase. And the indirect energy is the energy acquired process to acquire the process and to acquire the raw materials, etc., etc. And then to manufacture. Once the raw materials come into the factory, you need to consume energy for manufacturing the material and for the delivery, etc. So there are four interesting principles the entire sustainability is working. Whenever in the life cycle analysis of a building or of a material or of a product or anything, you actually talk about four principles or four attributes of classifications. Now, one is called, the first one is called actually cradle to gate principle. Now, cradle to gate principle involves so cradle is the starting point. So where you extract the raw materials, etc., etc., and gate actually is the factory gate, which means to say that the entire process involved from extracting raw materials, coming into the factory, manufacturing them, and then up to the gate. That means the delivery, the first stage of the delivery. The next stage is actually called the cradle to site, which means to say that you are actually including one more component to the entire analysis from gate of the factory to the site. So that means there are two components came into the picture. The third one actually is called the cradle to grave. Cradle to grave in the sense, after the building completes its life, it has to be demolished and then demolished. So once the building is demolished, either a new structure comes into the picture, and then this component, so including from the extracting material, location of the material extraction, till the demolition of the building, of the life cycle of a building, is actually called as cradle to grave. Now, when you apply sustainability principles, cradle to grave analysis is not sufficient. So that is why the fourth principle comes into the picture when we talk about sustainable construction, etc. And that principle is called cradle to cradle, which means to say that even after demolition, the building materials that probably go as a waste, we should find a way to use them, to recycle them, and then to use them. So that means you bring back those things actually into the mainstream. So this is actually, and then the second part of it is the recurring embodied energy. The recurring embodied energy is the energy consumed in maintenance and replacement and retrofit process of a facility. So once we have understood what exactly is embodied energy, now let us understand what embodied carbon is. Now, embodied carbon is the carbon footprint of a material. It considers how many greenhouse gases are released through a supply chain. Embodied carbon is usually expressed in kg carbon dioxide equivalent per kg. And sorry, I forgot to tell you, when the embodied energy is always expressed in terms of joules or megajoules per unit. It can be megajoules per square meter, megajoules per kg, megajoules per volume, or cubic meter, anything. So joules or megajoules or gigajoules, and as the number increases. So these are the embodied carbon is also, it can be measured into the four principles, what I say. And on the screen, what you're seeing is actually the embodied carbon of building materials. So there are a lot of inventories which are being updated as and when. So there is actually a very popular inventory that is called ICE, and ICE inventory, if you go to Google, they will give you a kind of a chart that is being updated. There is also an updated chart done by New Zealand, and there is also an updated chart being updated by ASEC, that is for which I am also a part of it. So there is this updation about the embodied carbon, embodied energy, etc., is happening. Just to give you an idea, you can see on the screen various elements, aluminium, fiberglass, brass, lead, etc. These are the various materials which actually get into the construction aspect of it. And then so aluminium, for example, aluminium has got highest embodied energy, and then aluminium has also got highest embodied carbon. So as per these figures, we should actually not use aluminium at all. Aluminium, for example, aluminium windows, aluminium joinery in a construction site, it actually, from the embodied energy and embodied carbon perspectives, this is sustainable. But here is the discretion of the engineer, which plays an extremely important role. That is why we say civil engineers are nation builders. Now, this is my personal opinion. To me, aluminium still becomes sustainable for few reasons. One is it's lightweight, so it lot of transportation, it saves a lot of fuel energy in transportation. So it is maintenance free. And then 85 to 90, almost literally 95% of aluminium can be recycled. So, and it is maintenance free, and then it lives long for it. So its impact, suppose even if it stays without any damage, without any repairs, etc., to the entire design life of a building. So even if you take about 50 years of this, the impact of aluminium gets distributed to over a large period. So per year, if you calculate of the impact of other materials and also aluminium works out to be much less than the other materials. So in this case, so it becomes very important for an engineer to begin with the discretion, to use his discretion. And now this is just an example to show you how what exactly is cradle to cradle principle, and then embodied carbon. The same thing applies for energy also, embodied energy also. The energy to dig the raw materials, and then the energy to shape the sand, water, etc., then to heat sheep blocks, and then which is the factory, then the transportation, then the energy to the tower crane you see. So it is shifting of the material, and this is actually the cycle which keeps happening. And just to give you an advantage, so the next one, now we come to the what exactly is the urbanization. And this is not I don't have to explain this. We are already seeing quite a bit of this. And then by 2050, about 70% of the global population starts living in urban areas. This is the entire demographic projection. But the present pandemic has also caused reverse migration, which never was anticipated by any of the agencies, even by the United Nations. This particular pandemic, rural reverse migration, is assumed to be for a very temporary period, and it will come back. But by 2050, it is still holds, the scientists still hold that the global population will start living in the urban areas. So actually it is the urban area which becomes more and more important, and which becomes extremely difficult for to get the land. There'll be a pressure on the land, etc., etc. So the sustainability aspect of it becomes more and more critical for the urban areas as they keep growing, and then we keep accumulating the population, higher and higher population. Now, let us come to when this is the case. So to me, focusing sustainability aspects on urban areas rather than rural areas becomes more and more critical for civil engineers' point of view. Now, let us look at the various building trends that of the future. Now, what exactly are going to be the future trends in the future? Now, number one is there shall be definitely demand for low energy buildings, and there shall be high-rise buildings which will come into the picture. There shall be demand for passive architecture, the precast and then pre-engineering buildings, monolithic and modular construction will gain huge popularity and will be in demand. Intelligent buildings, which means to say that there will be a huge amount of building automation that gets built into it, a huge amount of artificial intelligence which get built into the buildings. Not only in the buildings or in the operative stage, there will be a lot of artificial intelligence which will be built even during the construction and even inside the materials. There are a lot of experiments which are happening to put sensors into the concrete and to mainly see how the concrete behaves through the period. And there shall be also ergonomic buildings which come into the picture. Apart from this, there shall be the role of BIM, the role of green building ratings, and then building codes, national building codes, etc., Internet of Things, and the sustainability assessment prior to the construction. That is, when the projects are in the conceptual stage itself, how do we actually assess the building? These are going to take huge, there shall be a paradigm shift itself in the very design itself. Now, as I said, there has to be an integrated building. Nobody can say that, no professional can suddenly start claiming, this is my specialty, this is my specialty, this is my specialty. Gone shall be those days. And then there shall be probably every engineer has to be an expert in, at least he should have a know-how of every other fields, at least to take them forward. So these are the building trends in the future, and we need to go to the next slide. Yeah, now, in a nutshell, now let us come to what exactly is the sustainable construction. Sustainable construction involves very wide scope of activities, primarily put under 6 categories. What are these 6 categories, which you are now seeing on your screen? The first one, actually, of course, the space and structural design part of it, which becomes extremely important. The space designing, how do we allocate the space? That is the architectural's role, and then engineer's role. Everything comes together. How do we manage the space available? As the days progress, as the population increases, this space allocation more and more complicated. Then we'll have convention and alternative materials. And then along with these alternative materials, there shall be a huge amount of new generation materials which actually come into the picture. Then there shall be sustainability assessment, then construction technology. As I said, what kind of technologies, whether do we use slip forming, whether do we use climb form technology, whether do we use conventional or any other precast, modular, monolithic, etc., that becomes extremely important. And building automation, as I said, building automation comes into the picture, artificial intelligence comes into the picture. And then construction mechanization is going to play a major role, which becomes inevitable. How, and then this helps to a very great extent what exactly the construction mechanization is there. How do we actually account for the shortage of labor, etc., etc. These things come into the picture. Now, slowly we are actually coming and moving towards the sustainable construction. We understood what exactly is the sustainable definition of sustainable construction. We understood different terminologies involved in sustainable construction, and then we what are the main 6 phases of construction, which activities. So sustainable construction is just not on-site construction. Sustainable construction involves all that what we saw in the previous slide. Now there is one more important thing. If you take life cycle of a building, it has got 4 phases. Now, first phase is the pre-construction phase, and the second one is the construction phase. Third one actually is the operating phase, or the operation and then maintaining phase, and the fourth one is the demolition phase. Now, what happens is the entire consumption of the energy, or the total energy consumed, breaks between 20 to 25% and 70. This is 25 to 80% actually belongs to operating and then maintenance phase, which most of it is streamlined because of the new generation materials that have come into the picture, and then building automation that has come into the picture, the efficiency of the gadgets, efficiency of the lighting, efficiency of all those equipment which are which we see and then which we use for our human comfort. All those things are more or less streamlined. If you take light, we have LED, which there are a lot of less and less energy consuming, high efficiency materials are getting into the picture. And then this is 75 to 80% of the total energy is distributed over a long period. So it is throughout the life cycle of the design life of a building. Now, what happens is, if you see the pre-construction phase and then demolition phase, not much major energy is used, but the construction phase, which actually takes up very high energy, consume energy, it almost 20 to 25% of the energy which gets consumed mainly in the construction phase happens, and then this takes place, this energy, 20 to 25% energy gets consumed in 2 years, in about 3 years, taking the construction period of a building, where the major consumption happens. So if it happens only about 2 to 3 years, then there is what is called a carbon spike phenomena which happens. This carbon spike phenomena is my contribution, is one of a part of my PhD research, and this has been almost, after going through analyzing almost about more than 250 case studies across the country with varying climatic conditions. This has been a common phenomena called carbon spike phenomena. So it becomes all the more important for civil engineers to give more important to the construction phase, where see a carbon spike phenomena extremely dominant and extremely. Now, as we see, this is just I'll just quickly go through it, and because it's important for us to when we talk about sustainable development, sustainable construction, we need to understand this urbanization cycle, and then we begin with migration and urbanization. It literally leads to industrialization, infrastructure development, and that leads to environmental impact, and that impact slowly gets accumulated and converts into greenhouse gases, which result in global warming, and these are all actually man-made disasters. Again, it leads to migration. See, this population which actually migrates because of man-made disasters, let us say there is a population which moves because of the flood. These people come and actually, they don't move to the cities or urban areas because they want to have a better lifestyle or something like that. No, some of that population, the percentage of that population which moves from these disaster areas is mainly looking for safety. For example, flood area, people may go to a higher place with slightly higher altitude. These are actually called environmental refugees, and this is one of the important terms which we need to understand. Now, next is the sustainable construction design. Of course, we need to keep the urban heat island into effect, and this urban heat island effect actually causes a lot of microclimate changes, and what happening is because of the pressure on the land and then the land pressure, many of the architecture, many of the natural laws cannot be followed. So because of that, we actually cover a lot of heat that get onto the surface, reflected back, which further adds to the heat in the atmosphere, but also in the community itself, where the clusters of such buildings are there, the heat island effect phenomena occurs very, very prominently. So as a result of it, the air conditioners are used, and then it further leads to the greenhouse gas emission, etc., etc. So dear students, and then what is important is when we start taking designing into consideration, till now it is okay. But if, as we saw in the future, we need to take all these things into account. Now, for keeping these things into account, everything, all the 195 countries, when they came together, they established all challenges that are faced by the entire humanity were actually classified or distributed into 17 goals, which these are actually called the Sustainability Development Goals, and these are 17 Sustainability Development Goals. The entire challenges of the entire planet are classified and then put into these. These 17 challenges actually are subdivided into almost a few goals, 109 goals, etc., etc. And then each state and each country has further subdivided these goals into mini goals. And India, for example, has got about 569 targets, which actually have been So, which now all the research that is happening in and around the world, actually they are being requested to focus on any one of the 17 goals, which means to say that the research doesn't become a research, it becomes a part of the solutions for these sustainability development goals. Now, as civil engineers, we are directly responsible for almost about 6 to 7 sustainability development goals directly. As you can see on the screen, SDG 4, Sustainability Development Goal, which leads with education, Sustainability Development Goal, which leads with management, water and sanitation, SDG 9, SDG 11, SDG 13, SDG 17, all these things actually, we are directly connected with the sustainability development goals, which means to say that civil engineers have got a major role to play in sustainability development goal. What exactly is the need of the hour? Now, as I told you in the beginning, we cannot say that, okay, so from today we will start designing our buildings sustainable buildings. No, it doesn't work out that way. Now we are unfortunately in a stage where almost about 30 to 40 years adverse impact is already accumulated in the atmosphere. So we need to have a three-pronged attack. One is there has to be an adaptation to the existing. It is actually called the locked-in result of past greenhouse gas emissions. So to that situation, we need to adapt, and then we also need to keep the future things into mind, and then we need to mitigate. And for mitigation, decarbonization is the way. We will look at it slightly later. And then the third important thing is whenever we design our cities, whenever we design a habitat, and for a long design life of about 40 to 100 years, we need to take climate change into consideration. We need to take we cannot call our smart cities as smart unless we design the cities as resilient cities. And what exactly is this resilient? When we say a city is resilient or urban resilience, it means to say that how fast, if a disaster occurs or if something happens to the city, how fast the city is able to come back to its original form. So this becomes an important, the fundamental principle of urban resilient city design. Now, it is extremely critical for the infrastructure to cope up with the climate change. You know, it's beautifully put as buildings are actually next to our skin, like our clothes. What happens is, do we wear the way we wear different clothes? When I am in Chennai, I wear a different cloth when I am in Kashmir. I wear a different cloth when I am in Rajasthan. Then how can we have the same buildings which which do not apply or which do not consider the climate changes? So we need to design. There is a requirement by the nature from the buildings, and there is a requirement by the humanity for his comfort also by the building. So this, how do we strike a balance between these two, actually plays an important role of civil engineer. And then that is how we actually come to the understanding of the thing. Now we have talked about this adaptation. How do we adapt to the climate change, etc., etc. And there are many locked in period now. We need to systematically adapt to the change. I will rush through because the presentation is quite and because this is available to you probably. Hopefully Anil sir will make this available on the YouTube, etc. So I will probably skip reading these slides. And then sustainable adaptation, urban resilience, which we already talked about. Now, what exactly is the decarbonization? We need to mitigate. When we start mitigating the strategy, we need to reduce the fossil fuel burning. We need to increase the carbon sinks. We need to we need to increase the carbon sinks means, for example, reduce the deforestation, increase the forestation area, increase all those parameters where the carbon assimilation happens. You control the population, mitigate the migration by rural development, etc., etc. Improved energy efficiency. All these things, in a nutshell, if you want to put in three important captions, how do we decarbonize the projects, the infrastructure projects, the buildings, etc. You infuse efficiency, energy efficiency, and then the low carbon power, and then switch the fuel, which means to say that switch over from fossil fuel to green, clean energy buildings. Now, engineering trends in construction. These are in the earlier slides, we see what exactly is the. Now we have in the future, we are going to have these construction trends in this thing. So we will go one by one. There are going to be pre-engineered buildings, precast buildings, tilt-up construction methodology, slip forming, monolithic construction, advanced conventional methods, etc., etc., which we will actually see what kind of buildings will happen. And this is one example for pre-engineered building. We are all aware what exactly is the pre-engineered building is. And this is completely of a steel construction, and probably a combination of steel and then concrete will also be there because of the metal decking, etc., etc. The cladding will be of metal sheets. This is a faster construction, and this is going to gain more and more importance. And the next one is going to be the precast buildings, which we see the construction. I mean, all the precast units will be cast at some other place by maintaining the quality, reducing the wastage, maintaining the aestheticity, etc., etc. And we also, there are a lot of advantages and then benefits from the precast industry, which we are going to see. Now, only thing is, because of the paucity of time, we will not be able to go through completely the pre-construction, but it is there. The next one is actually precast honeycomb construction is also going to gain a lot of importance. What you see actually is the precast pods which are created, and then they are lightweight material and then used as facades, etc., with a lot of benefits. Now, the biomimicry is also one of the important aspects, where biomimicry is a process where we follow our design to something similar to the nature. So there are quite a few buildings, for example, bullet trains are built using, matching kingfisher's beak. And then there are a lot of structures like this using biomimicry. And then the tilt-up construction technology is the place where the wall panels, etc., as you see, are actually tilted. I mean, are cast over the on the sides of the where the erection has to take place, and then with the help of the cranes, etc., they are tilted, and then the construction, the timing will be there, the quality will be maintained. Any precast, this is the biggest advantage. Now, this is attracting, going to attract, and then of course this is the placer boom mounted on top of the slip forming equipment or the jump form equipment, where for extremely tall structures, these are the kinds of construction technologies, the formwork, advanced type of formworks that get used, they are used in the construction technologies. On the right one, what you see actually is the core of the Burj Khalifa, which is being taking place. And the other one is one of the towers in China, which is happening. And these are the technologies which we actually keep coming. The next slide, what you see here is construction. What we see, I think most of us, we see this, it is a very familiar, the floors and then the walls are cast together. Everything is cast together. It has its own advantages and its disadvantage. And along with these kinds of formworks and then different formworks, we also, the concrete technology also evolves by itself. Now, this requires self-compacting concrete and all those such wonderful the formworks. And this, what you see is, there is another concept of formwork which is called flywork, flying form of formwork. And then this is where we come into the use of advanced formwork techniques. Now, then when we talk about construction mechanization, we have so many equipment which come into the picture, help to increase the productivity, to increase the efficiency, to improve the quality, and also to reduce the wastage. For example, if we use a beautiful formwork, so we avoid the entire activity of plastering. Thereby, we save the natural resource, which we call it as sand. So, for example, can we think of metro construction without the presence of tunnel boring machines? It's impossible. We would have taken centuries together to actually underground metro construction, what I'm talking. So it would, so there are, we need to actually use, synergize and then bring harmony between the mechanization. For example, this, what we see actually is the steel fabrication in the yard itself. The AutoCAD drawings, etc., are fed, and then the bar bending schedule is generated by the system, and where they directly fed, and then the complete mechanization automation is ready, and then each set of reinforcement is separated, segregated, designated, and it's ready to come and then start fabricating its site. So these kind of automation, we need to save time, we need to get into the picture. Now, we also talked about building automation, and what will be the kind of building automation we are talking about? We are talking about civil engineering should become, and then there will be a lot of specification itself. We will require our buildings to be energy efficient, and then they should seamlessly integrate into the nature, and we should be self-sufficient in terms of water and energy, which means to say that our buildings have to be zero energy buildings. We should have very high percentage of fenestration without curtains, then autochromic glazing there, self-secured, smart and intelligent wall panels should store energy. All these kinds of demands will actually become the specifications. And then we also have parallel to this is the new generation materials which we actually come into the picture. What exactly are these new generation materials? Now, you can go into the details separately, make your study. Now we have what is called bendable concrete, self-healing concrete, translucent concrete, electrified wood, bioengineered bricks, sensitiles, is extremely sensitive to the temperature inside and outside and changes its color. So you really don't need the curtains at all. And you also don't need to run your ACs because the glass is taking care of it automatically. And then there is a now cross-laminated timber, which actually is gaining very popularity. This is also called mass timber construction. So this cross-laminated timber actually is being used as the material for the framework in place of steel and then concrete. One of the buildings, a 6-story building is happening in Delhi. And then there are quite a few buildings which are already, there is an 8-story building which is done using this cross-laminated timber. You can probably Google search and get more details. Then we have carbon fibers and then hempcrete, which also is a concrete, porous concrete kind of a thing. Then we have very strong 3D graphene material, which probably in future is going to replace reinforcement. Then we have eco bricks, etc., intelligent fixtures, facades, panels, solar. All these things are new generation materials which are going to play a major role. And for these things, we actually, I suggest, because most of them are students here, and I also suggest Sridevi ma'am and the other faculty who are listening to this, please actually give your students the projects which are actually anything that is related to the sustainability development goals. So the youngsters are smart enough to come out with some kind of a solution which will also help benefit the society. Now, with these new generation of materials, we need to, when we start designing a sustainable construction, we need to take the dynamism of the See, we already have greenhouse gases. They're available in the atmosphere, which is dynamic. And there is already embodied energy in the material, which also is dynamic. And construction materials, which we have so many construction materials, so many options. And then every material has its own changing, its reaction, interaction. And all these materials which already exist and then come with us, and then we come together, they also interact and then react to each other. And actual sustainability assessment is that interaction factor, which actually is meant here as I. The synergy effect, which will not go into the detail. This is slightly advanced technology which comes into the picture. But in essence, what I mean to say is, it is just not enough to understand the material. We need to understand the dynamism of each material, etc. Now, then comes to there are several sustainability indicators. I would not like to go into these details. There are a lot of indicators such as how life cycle analysis. We calculate the embodied energy, then we calculate the based on the embodied carbon, then we and United Nations Environmental Program actually calls for a specific development of a specific sustainable indicator or sustainable development indices, climatic condition based, and then in fact city based also. These are actually called the several sustainability indices are already developed to the various things. And this is a very known P chart. There are a lot of activity percentage divided. And then this is basically the foundation works, etc., etc. How much each activity consumes. The superstructure bricks consumes about 25%, let us say. All these activities are split, major activities are split into the percentage-wise this thing. So now let us come to a similar a case study where I have considered about 18, which is 18-story building, which is about 18-floor RCC framework, and area is about 2 lakh square feet, 25,000 square meters. Walls comprised of solid concrete blocks. Flooring is in combination, that is, we have ceramic tiles, marble, granite, etc., all in combination, cement flooring, vacuum dewatered flooring, etc., etc. Then joinery is also a combined the mixture from wood to UPVC, formwork, conventional, waterproofing, crystalline method, etc., etc. Now, how do we start going ahead with this? I will give you a sustainable construction. Prior to sustainable construction, we need to understand what exactly, where does the building stands from sustainability point of view. Now, once the sustainability once you have the building parameters, for example, they can be classified into several primary parameters as shown in this thing. What exactly is the role of concrete? What exactly per square meter? Per square meter of all the entire quantity you can arrive, and then you can actually calculate using the life cycle analysis. You can actually calculate what exactly is the embodied energy and of a particular building. Now, for example, for this particular building, the total embodied energy is, it comes to about 5,185.73 megajoules per square meter. Now, this is actually the total embodied energy of that particular building in consideration. Now, if you put this in P chart, now this is how it looks, and then kindly see that here what happens is concrete takes major impact from the embodied energy perspective. The second major impact is steel works. When we talk about concrete, it is not the aggregate or the stand, it is mainly the cement. I'm sure Anil Pillai will, because he from the cement industry, and then mainly because of the cement usage. That is the reason why alternative materials for the cement, as the cementitious materials, etc., are coming into the picture. Now, next contributor is steel. And see, the next most important parameter comes as the formwork, which is the most neglected. I really don't know how many of our engineers have complete idea of the formwork. No, it is just left in the field. If you go, it will be just left to the carpenters, and then they take least interest in seeing what exactly is the formwork and how can we actually reduce the energy impact because of the formwork. Now, there's no point in worrying too much about painting. Yes, we have low VOC paints, etc., but it doesn't really contribute. But the major saving has to be done in 3 or 4 concrete, steel works, waterproofing, and then you have masonry works, which are these things. So ultimately, everything has got its own contribution. We need to find sustainability or match in that. Now, in terms of cost, what exactly it means to the building. Now, embodied energy, I'll just take a few seconds to this. 5,186 meters per square meter is actually the energy. And then the total embodied component for the entire building comes to about 13 crore megajoules. And then assuming that 3.64 megajoules per kilowatt hours, which is equivalent to 1 unit of electricity, total embodied energy component comes to about 3.64, and at the rate of 8 rupees per unit, that is the commercial rate of electricity, now it comes to about 29.12 crores. Now you can understand the building, the case study of the building, what we have taken into consideration, has an embodied energy component worth of 29.12 crores. If you compare it, least energy embodied energy building, which actually has got about 9 crores equivalent of embodied energy. So that means you have a possibility, it is potential to reduce. It may not come down to 9 crores, but definitely there is a possibility to reduce. So similarly, on the embodied carbon, we can actually calculate. So the total embodied carbon can come into the picture. Then embodied carbon distribution of the primary parameters can also be put as is on the screen, which gives you. And similarly, the calculation from the component in terms of cost, actually it has got about 10.4 crores as compared to 3 crores of a benchmark project. So embodied carbon and embodied energy itself has got about 39 crores or 40 crores for that particular building. Now, this is how the important aspect is. Apart from that, now we talked about analyzing a building from embodied energy perspective, then we saw it from embodied carbon perspective. Now, what exactly is a sustainability development index? Now, only from embodied energy point of view or embodied carbon point of view, it may not be sufficient to design a sustainable construction. We need to take embodied energy into consideration. We need to take embodied carbon. We need to take several transport energy components. We also need to take greenhouse gases impact, because there's already a greenhouse gas impact, which we need to take the interaction of various materials, as we saw in our previous slides. And other environmental indicators we need to take into consideration, which we are lacking at present. So in all this, so as many as environmental indicators you infuse into your design aspect, then more and more closer will we become to the sustainable construction. So once we take these things, and it is possible to develop, to analyze the same building, and this table looks very complicated. It is complicated, a lot of mathematics is involved in it. But what I mean to say is there is a method which, based on the Sustainability Development Index, we actually can arrive at the same distribution as we did it for the low embodied energy and then embodied carbon components. So this is total value is about 23,000. It's just a number. So for example, once then we actually can compare the three from embodied energy perspective, and then from embodied carbon perspective, and then from the sustainability development indices perspective. Now, suppose I talked about this is for one building. The same thing can be actually applied to cluster of buildings, etc., and then compared to the benchmark project. We need to establish a benchmark because there has to be a comparison. So once we compare, once we have the details of various projects, as we saw it in the last slide, we can actually apply statistics methodologies, try to find out what exactly is the mean value, what is the standard deviation, what is the variance, and then what are the baseline values. And then we can also actually arrive at the ranges, and then graphs can be actually plotted for a residential project so that we can easily classify them into no sustainability zones, low sustainability buildings or projects, then moderately sustainable, and then high sustainable. This, for example, what you see on the bottom is the baseline value. As compared to the baseline values, we can actually project the entire application with respect to embodied energy. What you're seeing on the screen is from the embodied energy perspective, how can we classify the buildings? And similarly, from the embodied carbon, how can we classify the buildings? From the SDI sustainability range, from the sustainability development indices, how can we cluster the projects? All these things can actually be done. And then not only a particular building, but it can be applied. All these methodologies can be applied at the conceptual stage once the bill of quantities is ready, and then we can come and understand the whether the building is sustainable, not sustainable. Once we understand that the building is not sustainable, for example, then the building is not constructed. We are still at the conceptual stage, designing stage. We can alter the material, we can alter the methodology, we can substitute optional materials, etc., etc. And then we will have a lot of potential to reduce and then design a sustainable building. Now, we also, this is, just put this because there are more number of students. So this actually can can be taken up by the students as a project work. This is actually one of the project works done by one of the MTech students whom I guided. For example, they have done it on formwork system. And if you see all the three methodologies were used: conventional formwork, plywood formwork, and then aluminum formwork. These were the three different typologies which were taken, and then they were calculated based on embodied energy perspective, embodied carbon perspective, and then interaction in the sustainability development indices perspective. Now you will understand the conventional formwork has got very high impact, will consume very high energy. Plywood formwork will consume moderate energy, and then aluminum formwork will have the least formwork. Now look at this. The figures, aluminum, I would like to recall, aluminum with much higher embodied energy and embodied carbon. It's not sustainable if you look at those figures. But as a whole, as a system, if you take aluminum formwork, gives you the least impact. Why? In case of a formwork, aluminum formwork can take about 150 to 200 repetitions. Number two is, if you use the aluminum formwork, you will completely avoid the plastering activity. And if you complete the formwork after 200 repetitions, it is not giving the finished project. The 90 to 95% of the aluminum formwork can be recycled, and then the wastage will be minimum. So this is the beauty of aluminum formwork. And then it has got least, from all three perspectives, the aluminum formwork appears to be. Only from the economic point of view, yes, you should have a minimum square meters of the built up area of the construction, then it works out to be economical. But in terms of for example, we saw monolithic construction with aluminum formwork, which actually goes into so these kinds of individual things can, the next slide is what tells us about design steps, which I have already explained. So these are the next slide will some of the students who have taken individual projects and then worked. For example, the wall, there are different infill materials, bricks, mud brick, concrete blocks, aerated blocks, etc. And then from the embodied energy perspective, we find that mud brick or the soil cement block, etc., that it consumes low energy. Thus, we can actually take different materials and come to an understanding which material is low energy, which material has got low carbon value. And then subsequently, the students took about 6 or 7 projects, analyzed the whole thing from embodied energy perspective, embodied carbon perspective, and also the sustainability development indices provided to them, life cycle analysis. Finally, they classified the building, which has got with 5% impact to 74% impact, which has got the highest. So these are the different embodied energy ranking also can actually happen. Now, there are a lot of building codes, energy conservation building code talks about it. And then we also have the national building code, which comes into the picture. And then a lot of things are already there, but still we are waiting for a specific that comprises of guidelines which are required by the construction industry. Dear friends, I think this is the last slide of my presentation, and I am extremely sorry I have overshot the requirement, but that was that is the kind of 15 minutes, 20 minutes we have spent little more time, and then I hope it is worth. And thank you very much for the wonderful patient hearing. And I suppose the slide quality was good, and you could hear me. The audibility also was good. Thank you once again for all the stakeholders of the Ramco and then Dr. Sridevi ma'am. Thank you very much, and over to you, Anil.
Thank you, sir. It was really a wonderful presentation, done so passionately. And within the limited time, I think you had the challenge of covering all the topics. We are sure that if you are okay with it, we can conduct future webinars on some of those topics because you had covered in detail, and you have in fact presented how to use sustainability at the practical level and also quantify it, because whatever is measured gets done, and that is I think one of the really the hallmarks of your presentation. Thank you so much. And in fact, as you rightly pointed out, concrete by virtue of its sheer quantity, consumes so much energy, because concrete itself is the second most consumable material, as we all know, and by virtue of its quantity, it consumes so much energy. Can we have some questions, sir, if it's okay with you? Dr. Anchuri had a couple of questions.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, Dr. Anchuri had made a couple of comments also. What he was saying is that critical thinking, information analysis, and interdisciplinary collaboration are all vital to develop the best solution for sustainable development, and education is the cornerstone of this process. Dr. Ajit, nice and very apt presentation for FTV. That is one thing. Second thing what he had was that the most opportune time for today's students who are the future industry leaders to establish this concept is in parallel of other construction fundamentals in higher education, but why they not yet have fully integrated sustainable education? That is one question that he has asked.
He himself also is in the field. I think he should be able to answer it. Yeah, he should be able to. Anchuri, you should be able to answer this. But there are a lot of efforts which are happening now. See, for example, I had an opportunity to interact with one of the Japanese professors. Okay. Now, in the entire Japan, because I had a presentation to be made in Kyoto University. So during that, there were about 12 research students who were doing research on sustainability, and each research scholar had associated his project to one of the sustainability development goals. So which means to say that the day they are awarded with the doctorate degree, from that next day itself, that research is not going in the shelf, but it is going to be a solution to the country. So this is what is important. To that effect, I think all of us should take into consideration. Very unfortunately, we are only talking, but we are not at the university level, at the syllabus level changing. We need to put in a lot of efforts to bring them onto this thing. Even former itself, sir, is not given due. That is the unfortunate stage, but we have a long, many miles to cover, and then people like Anchuri should help us.
Thank you so much, sir, for that answer. And Dr. BSC Rao had a comment, as usual, an excellent and comprehensive presentation by my good friend, Dr. Ajit Sabnis. Thank you very much.
Thank you, BSC. Thank you so much, if you're there. Yeah.
So that was a good presentation, sir, and I am sure that your presentation would have opened up more opportunities for students to do a lot of work in this area. And we would also, as you rightly pointed, we would also be making available this presentation on YouTube as well as on FB Live, so that the students can again go through the presentation and benefit from it. So this has opened a wide array of opportunities for them to do projects as well as to do a lot of work in these areas.
Yeah, I would like to say one few words to students community who are listening to this. The future engineering is going to be an integrated engineering. I mean, there shall not be very few will civil engineering, mechanical engineering. These are going to be specializations, but there shall be definitely an integrated engineering course which will come into the picture. And there are many international universities in which it is already started. So what we are going to talk about is this, and civil engineering students today will have huge amount of opportunity. Like, for example, civil engineering with law background. For example, BSc was talking about his forensic engineering presentation. Now, the civil engineering with law background probably will be most in demand for a new emerging fields like forensic engineering. isn't it? So similarly, there are quite a few engineering, the advances. I think students will have a lot more opportunities to diversify, and they don't have to actually be think that they don't have any more projects. So the engineering industry, real estate is in down, etc., etc. This is very, very temporary phase. The pandemic will go, and especially in India, I would like to take this, though it is not relevant, because India today has got much higher percentage of youth. We have higher probability of overcoming pandemic much faster than the other countries where the old age demographic projection is there. So with that, we will overcome this, but you will have a lot of opportunities. But please make use of this period to gain more and more knowledge. And then, of course, Ramco is helping you to this.
Thank you so much, sir, for that positive note. I think even this pandemic has in fact taught us that, how environment, and we could see the difference actually in the nature. And now there has been a lot of emphasis put on the indoor air quality as well. Why air condition should be put, why not have more emphasis on ventilation, have the, the improvement in air quality. I think this has taught us a lot of lessons, and I'm sure that students will have more opportunities in these areas as well. So that was a wonderful presentation. Dr. Sridevi, any remarks from your side?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Ajit, sir, thank you very much for your excellent presentation. And it is very comprehensively you have dealt. And I'm sure students as well as faculty will definitely benefit from your presentation. Because I myself learned many things today, which I did not know otherwise. It's learning for and
thank you very much for the opportunity. Yeah, students,
sir, if they have we are very fortunate that we had to. I mean, we are able to hear you today.
Any questions, ma'am, from students?
We have a DST project, sir, which is on energy efficient building. We are doing in collaboration with IIT Roorkee and IIT Delhi. So here in our campus, we are constructing one base case model studio as well as another studio with energy efficient building materials. So that project is it's an ongoing project. We are half done. So in this regard, definitely I'll come to you, sir, for your suggestions and to take this project forward.
There's a question by Dr. Kalgal. In the pie chart for embodied energy, 59% or so was due to concrete, but in the pie chart from SDI perspective, concrete took up only 7%. Could you please elaborate on that?
I will have to go back to the slides.
Yeah, please. You can share the screen, sir.
I have to share the screen, no? Yeah. Not coming up. Anyway, one second. I will.
I think it should
try again, sir. I just shifted the presenter role back to you.
The third icon is not working. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, what is the question, Dr. Kalgal had from the embodied perspective?
Yeah. In the pie chart for embodied energy, 59% or so was due to concrete, but in the pie chart from SDI perspective,
only from the embodied energy perspective.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, sir.
Yeah. Can I answer?
Yeah, please.
See, in the pie chart for embodied energy, the concrete works has got about 53% contribution. And from embodied carbon perspective, it is 59%. And from the SDI percentage, that is Sustainability Development Indices, which actually involves lot of interactions into the picture. There, the concrete percentage is only 7%, which is the very right observation, which means the steel and then the formwork from SDI perspective is very high, for the simple reason that lot of interactions of greenhouse gases, all the materials, etc. are taken, and the SDI indices totally composes of about 21 environmental indicators. When we take 21 environmental indicators and then see that into the perspective and then distribute it along, then considering the durability of the concrete into mind, concrete gets lesser percentage. That is why to see the overall and to see the overall picture of the impact of concrete, the average of embodied carbon, then the embodied energy, and then finally other 12 independent environmental indicators. Other 9 indicators are actually dependent indicators. So that is how they form 21 indicators. But that is the reason why concrete has got much less impact, because of its durability and then because of its lasting long life as compared to the other materials.
So that's what he was making further statement. So concrete is not a big villain.
Yeah, it is not a big villain. Yes, the design life of a building.
Yeah.
It is, that is precisely why I talk about carbon spike. And it is the mainly during the construction period. And when do we use cement, sir? Only in the construction period, no?
Correct.
So you don't, Dr. Kalgal need not be very happy to say that cement industry doesn't have much impact. When we use the cement, concrete doesn't have impact, but cement has a lot of impact because we use highest amount of cement only in the construction phase.
So that is where the usage of blending materials, cementitious material come into play.
Yep.
To decrease as much as possible the impact of this. So that was a very good this thing.
Yes.
And we were able to cover most of this thing, and thank you so much. I think that's the number of questions. We don't have any more questions.
Okay, good.
That's it. So we had a very good interaction. And one more thing, what Dr. Anchuri had, what kind of plan needs to be developed accounting for faculty support, active learning and development of soft skill, which is vital to successful implementation. I being visiting faculty would like to know from you, you also being an educationist too, that is what he was.
Yeah, there are a lot of materials from the practical, pragmatic view can be, I can share it with Dr. Anchuri. We can jointly think about it and then see how it best can. All is available in a graphic format. I'm actually working with one of the reputed software companies to actually bring it to an app level stage. So you feed your total area of the building, and then where it gives you the entire parameter of the sustainability, at least about gets distributed in about 12 to 15 primary parameters, and then you can identify which is the main parameter, whether it is concrete or steel or formwork or whatever it is, or plastering, whatever it is. So which is more responsible for the impact, and that alternative solutions can be found out from that. So that is being developed, but otherwise it is readily available in the Excel format, which actually a lot of material available which can be shared. In fact, I have shared this with Government of Kannada, and then unfortunately there was change in the guard, so it has to be taken forward. Yeah.
So thank you so much for that comprehensive presentation, and I'm sure that we will take this forward and we will see how best can be done. Each one of us from our respective professions, I think we need to look at sustainability from a very serious perspective, because as you have rightly pointed out, in terms of numbers, the carbon dioxide emission, the greenhouse gas emission and all that, I'm sure that all of us would have been, much more sensitized to these issues, and we will take it forward. Thank you, sir, for your presentation, and we hope to meet again on this webinar, virtual presentation, to speak about these burning topics. So that was a very good discussion. Thank you so much. Thank you for sparing your time. So we meet
Thank you,
tomorrow
Dr.
again at 11 o'clock for the next round of webinar. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Dr. Sridevi. Thank you so much. Thank you.